Please turn, if you will, to that passage in Nehemiah. And I want you to stay there with me, if you will. And we're going to consider this text. Before we do, this information, you missed Brian and Carol staring. Apparently, Carol got sick somehow this afternoon, and Brian left here and was taking her to the emergency room. And he has not told us what it is yet. He had said he would text Paul. He had seen him earlier when he hears or knows what's going on. So I'm sure we missed them tonight, and now you know what is going on. So if we'll be remembering them, and we'll try to get, if we get information before we leave, of course, we will pass it on about that. Nehemiah chapter 4. I hope you will get the outline before you leave if you don't already have it. There's an outline back in the back where we always put them. It'll be valuable to you, I think, because it'll help you sort of get in perspective what is happening in the background of this story, this history account in the book of Nehemiah. And it has there for you the exile dates and the return dates of the people of God coming out of Babylonian captivity. To sort of give you an idea, you recall that finally the people of God had become so wicked that God decided, okay, that's it. And now there's going to be captivity. And he sent the Babylonians to them, and they conquered them. They took them away in 3 different carryings away. In 606, in 596, and in 587. 3 different times they came down and took another group back with them. They were there as God had promised for 70 years. And in 70 years, he would bring them back again. And it happened in 536. 70 years after that first taking away, that they were led back to begin the process and begin construction on rebuilding their city. What we have before us in Nehemiah chapter 4 is an account of the building of the city wall. Now, we don't have any kind of experiential understanding of a city wall. We don't live in that kind of society. But as one writer said that I was reading, he said, a city in that time without a city wall was no city at all. That's the way he put it. Because that was the symbol that you had a strength about you. It was a symbol that you could take care of yourself. It showed that you had the wherewithal that no one could easily come and just take you away. So the city wall was extremely important. And when we come to Nehemiah chapter 4, that is what they are dealing with. And I want you to notice with me, if you will, what happens here. And we take this from the words in that passage that was read in verse 15, they returned to the wall. They returned to the wall. One of my favorite passages to preach about, oddly enough, happens to be Nehemiah 3. Now, when you go back and you read Nehemiah 3, you're going to think, you are strange. That doesn't make any sense. Because basically, Nehemiah 3 is a little bit like reading the chronological, or the genealogical, that is, lists in Scripture. Because all it does is it says, these people built here, and these were, and these were, and these were, on and on and on. And the whole point is almost overlooked. But I like a sermon that I preach from time to time from that text, because it says that everyone had a part and everyone was involved. And when we get in chapter 3, they were building that wall. They were doing well. Everything was going great. They were organized. They were building that wall. And then chapter 4 hit. And as chapter 4 happens, verse 1, and it happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. Sanballat did not want the people of God reestablished there. While the people of God were in captivity for 70 years, others came in and lived in their land. And they intermingled some with the people who didn't all go. The poorest of the poor didn't go. But all these other people who had come in were excited because this is our land now. But all of a sudden, God was sending them back. And Sanballat didn't like it one little bit. The phrase, they returned to the wall, obviously means they had left the wall. They were building well in chapter 3, but in chapter 4 they became discouraged. Here were people who had been doing so well, and now they were discouraged in their building. And it was because they had real opposition. Notice what they had. They had opponents. If you look down through here, you will find Sanballat. You'll find Tobiah the Ammonite. And as you walk down through, you will see the Arabs, verse 7, and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites. And all of these people had moved into that territory. This was real opposition. These opponents really were their enemies. They really did not want them to build. That discouraged the people of God. But number two, there were various opinions being expressed. Some of them are rather interesting. Look at verse 3. What did Tobiah say? Well, whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. How many of you have ever built walls? How many of you have been involved in building a wall? Anybody ever built a wall? I mean, with your own hands, been involved in it? Yeah, okay. Now, there are probably different degrees of success. I told you about the brick wall I tried to build and stopped because within 3 courses, it was so out of shape, I hired it out. We still have a wall standing in our bathroom that I built. And it's sort of shaped like this. It bulges. Quit laughing, Tim. It's going to be fixed. You know, I just jump in and do things. And if it doesn't look good, it's okay. I'll fix it eventually. But now I have built some walls that did pretty well. And I believe you probably have too. But these people decided that if you built the wall, if a fox runs on it, it'll fall down. Well, that's not very nice. That's a little tough. Well, look at Sanballat back up in verse 2. What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned? That's the opinion of the people who are opposing them. But listen to this. Look at verse 10. Judah said, the opinion of some of the people of God, the strength of the laborers is failing. There is so much rubbish. We're not able to build the wall. So varied opinions caused discouragement. And there were some real obstacles. Judah identified the fact that there is rubbish, and this rubbish is such, we can't build. Look how messed up this is. Look at the process we have to go through. It is very difficult. We're having some real obstacles. Look at verse 4. We are despised. That's a real obstacle. Therefore, these people had become discouraged. And they needed to return to the wall, for they had left because of their discouragement. By the way, these pictures are archaeological digs uncovering the sections that have been dated to the Nehemiah wall in Jerusalem. That's what these are pictures of at each different place. But number two, they became encouraged. Nehemiah was a great leader. There are many people who do leadership workshops and talk about leadership to churches and different groups, and many of them use Nehemiah. He's a tremendous leader. Look at verse 13. Therefore, I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall and at the openings. He was involved with these people. He took it on himself. He said, here is what I'm going to do. But back up, if you will. Let's see, I'm looking for verse 13. There it is. He sat the people by their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. The first thing he did to give them encouragement was he armed them. He armed them. These were people who had a real enemy facing them, and they were scared, and I get that. They really needed to know that they're going to be okay. So he armed them, and he armed them properly. Verse 14. I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Number two, he assured them. He armed them and he assured them, the Lord is going to fight for you. But then he aroused them. You have wives and daughters and sons. Now get up and fight. This is a man, Nehemiah, who understood how to lead people. It was a proper order. Notice, he didn't tell them to fight until he had armed them. He did not tell them about the Lord until he had said, now let me get you on board. In other words, here's our need. Let's meet the need. Then let me tell you this. It relates to benevolence. If someone is starving to death, but they don't know Jesus, they're not going to listen to Jesus until their bellies quit talking. It's the same thing. They were afraid. And so he put what they needed to get rid of their fear. And then he said, oh, by the way, I've given you the arms that you need, but the Lord's going to fight for you. And now, to get you up to doing the part you need to do, you have family. Get up and fight. Nehemiah encouraged them in the very ways that they needed to get back to the wall. And finally, they were courageous. They were courageous. Look at verse 15. When our enemies heard that it was known to us. First of all, they were courageous because now they were informed. It was known to us. What did Nehemiah do? He made sure that they knew the truth. What was the truth? God's going to fight for you. God's on your side. You have everything you need to do. Now let's get up and do the work. God is here. Because they were properly informed, now the enemy was afraid. Haven't you always heard that knowledge is power? Is that what they say? Knowledge is powerful. Because their knowledge was changed, by the information they were given, no longer were they afraid. Continue on. Verse 16. From that time on, half of my servants worked at the construction. In other words, now he instructed them. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it such that you can do what needs to be done both ways. We have to build a wall, but we also have to make sure that we protect ourselves. And he devised a plan. And the plan appeared to be that some people stood behind the workers with the necessary means to fight a battle, while the other workers were working on building the wall. And in that way, he instructed them, we're not going to stop just because we have opposition, but we're going to face the opposition, and we're also going to do the work. So he instructed them how to do it. And by that information and by his instructing, they were inspired. They got up and did. Verse 18. Every one of the builders got busy. Verse 19. The work is great and extensive. We are separated one from another. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we labored in the work. Verse 22. Let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem for protection. Here's what's going on. These people had been building the wall. Opposition arose. Now they are discouraged. Nehemiah stepped back and said, wait a minute. Here is why you need to be encouraged. They listened. And after they were encouraged, they were now courageous. And they did exactly what they needed to do. They built that wall. And they defended themselves against their enemies. When they returned to the wall, they did not leave it again. They built the temple. They built their houses. They reconstructed their city. These people who had left finally returned and never had to leave again. We are ready to return to the wall. Just out of curiosity for me and maybe for all of us, how many of you moved here after 2006 to be a part of this congregation? Just raise your hands. Look around. After 2006, okay? This is the group that started here after we moved into this facility. And now, we're ready to return to the wall. I've heard people talk about in different places and at different times. I've heard people talk about almost in a way where they just sit and think, no, I remember how wonderful it was when they had 100 of us and we were all so close, so dear. And I loved it. It was so wonderful. I understand that. I get that. And yes, there is some longing for those kinds of things from time to time. And yes, there is value in that. But let me remind us, we cannot be the Lord's church if we decide at any time to stand pat. If we ever decide that we're just going to stop where we are and we're finished. If we ever say we've done enough, then we're through. We can't ever do that. Because the truth of the matter is, Every congregation of God's people must be building a wall continually. Now, that wall takes on many different forms, admittedly, but it's always building. We're never finished. We've never gone far enough. We've never arrived. And we never will. There's always a wall that needs to be built. We've gone through many walls in years past. And now we have the opportunity for another. Maybe that opportunity is now. Maybe it's the near future. But it's a wall nonetheless. I know this. The wall that we need to build needs to be built. It may not be built tomorrow, next year, but if we decide that we're never building the wall, then we're not going to be the people that God wants us to be. Because the truth of the matter is, we're going to be hampered by not continuing to build in every way that that concept can be considered. Because that wall involves spiritual maturity. That's building a wall. That wall involves evangelistic outreach. That's a continual building of a wall. And the wall involves facilities to do what we need to do. The obstacles that they faced, the same obstacles that we face. We're not always, every single person, in lockstep agreement with every single detail. There's some opposition, there are different opinions, and there have certainly been obstacles and still are. Financial for sure. But they should not discourage us. You know why? Because we've had those obstacles at every wall we've ever built. And guess what? We're here. We're still going. We're still building. We're still moving forward. So I know that we don't need to be discouraged. In fact, we need to be encouraged. Encouraged that what we are trying to do is to deepen our spiritual connection to each other and the Lord, and to reach out to those who need to hear. And if that is our motivation in every wall that we build, then God will bless it. But if our motivation turns inward and becomes arrogance and becomes competition with other places, just to be like the nations around us, God won't bless it. So I think we can be encouraged, because I know the shepherds who lead this place are leading in the right way with respect to the reasoning behind building the wall. Therefore, it is time for us to be courageous. Courageous. And to say, let's build. Meaning, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to support. I'm going to be on board. And whatever those who shepherd us lay out by challenge in front of us, let's get on board. It's not something that any shepherd would shove down anybody's throat. That's not how the church operates. So we have ample opportunity to be involved by talking about and suggesting. And what you have seen out there in the lobby is the result of that. So many people have been and will be involved in that planning stage. And when it's time, whenever that time is, when it's time to build the wall, let us be courageous and build the wall. We've done it in the past, and after we are gone, I pray that they're still building walls on top of the walls that we've been building. That's how it works. It is important that you build a wall in your life. It is important that you fortify your life and the lives of your family. You're building a wall too, to protect yourself, to strengthen yourself, to provide security for your family in the Lord. Keep building your walls. If you've not started the building properly because you're not a child of God, then you're just like these outsiders. They were outside. They were not God's people. They were not a part of building the wall. You may not be fighting and in opposition and trying to destroy, but if you're not a part of God's family, then you're not a part of the building the wall as you should be. You need to build your wall with the Lord. And it starts by letting Jesus into your life. When you're baptized into Christ for the remission of sins, He begins to build the wall in your life, providing His Spirit to you and to give you that strength and encouragement that you need. Sometimes people move away from the wall. Well, it's time to return to your wall. And if you've been unfaithful to God, don't you want that strength of coming back and being a part of returning to the wall? Tonight, before we leave, if we can help you with the strength of building your wall with the Lord, will you let us know as we stand and sing together?